Welcome back everybody, I am Follygon and we are on day 13 of Sculptober with the prompt lore. If you don't know what Sculptober is, it is a challenge all October long, sculpting something new every day based off of a prompt from sculptober.com. But before we get into today's video, click that subscribe button if you are new around here, and check out gumroad.com/Follygon for all of my courses, brushes, and materials. So you'll notice that today's video is a little bit different. I've done this in one other where I haven't sculpted every single thing from scratch. Well, technically that's not true. I did sculpt the base that I'm using from scratch. I just did it a little while ago. I used it to create Sailor Moon for a previous video. I'll throw a link to that up on screen. And I'm using that as a starting point today so that we can focus a little bit more on the idea of expression. But before we do that, I have to turn this character into the Bride of Frankenstein. I've been trying to focus on different ideas and topics for each day of Sculptober, and I mentioned in yesterday's video that expression would be something fun that we could focus on in a future video. So hey, we're gonna do that in this one. The first thing that needs to happen though is color change. She's supposed to be dead or reanimated, I guess. So I go for that kind of classic cartoony green/bluish skin tone, give her some new paint around her lips to kind of darken the color, and I do the same thing around the eyes, starting to get that to feel a bit more sunken in. You'll notice that my brush has this red line trailing behind it. If you've ever seen that before in any of my videos, well, you probably have because I use it on a lot of different brushes. It's what's called lazy mouse, and lazy mouse is exactly what it sounds like. If you're having trouble drawing really straight, clean, or kind of more stable lines, lazy mouse is a great way to achieve that effect. It essentially trails behind your brush stroke, similar to something like Lazy Nizumi, if you guys have ever heard of that, and makes your brush stroke much more smooth. I also change things like the shape of the nose and the shape of the ears, as well as the back of the head a little bit, but that's more so just kind of cleaning some stuff up. Then it's over to the eyebrows to begin changing those. Something I really wanted to point out here was how much of a difference there is in expression from just changing the shape of the eyebrows. The eyes and mouth are the most expressive part of your character, and I think just changing the shape of the eyebrows here really demonstrates how important the eyes and brows are. Now, it wouldn't be the Bride of Frankenstein without that classic haircut or hairstyle that's kind of like Gerald from Hey Arnold. He had that really tall hairstyle going on, or maybe Marge Simpson. That's probably more known than Gerald from Hey Arnold. So I start creating that extraction from the hair. I use a mask to get that basic shape first, pull that up, and start shaping it into the basic form. From there, it's just a lot of cleanup, playing around with the shape, starting to get it feeling a bit closer to where I want. Typically, I don't get everything correct or exactly perfect in the first try. I need to just get something on my canvas quickly and then go back through and continue to make changes from there. I start adding some more form to the surface to break up the silhouette, get it feeling a bit closer to the hairstyle. And then after that, I start using a lot of remeshing techniques to clean up the form and focus on edge quality, which is something that we've talked about in a lot of our previous videos. The basic idea there is making sure that your sharp and soft edges aren't exactly the same throughout their entire length. So if you have something that's really sharp, think about how you can taper that out into something that's a bit more soft. Then I start filling in the black color just to get an idea of the silhouette to make sure it's heading in the right direction. And then it's off to getting that classic white stripe down the hair. For this, I initially just duplicate the mesh and use what is called a slice curve brush. That's that kind of wavy line you saw going through the hair just a moment ago. And I use that to create or chop off the exact section of the hair that I want. Then I use some more remeshing techniques just to clean it up, get it a bit more simple and a bit more clean. Then it's on to creating the front portion of her hair. I actually wasn't sure if I was going to do this. It's not something that's in the original film or the original actress's hairstyle. I think it's Elsa Lanchester, if I'm not mistaken. But I did see it in a lot of artwork and I thought it was kind of a fun touch. So I wanted to include it here with my version. For that, I essentially just create a cylinder, kind of chop it up into almost a cinnamon roll type shape, and then fill that in with a black color, kind of clean it up, inflate it, and get that where it needs to go. Then it's off very quickly to creating some bat earrings. These are super simple to make, nothing too crazy, just some primitive spheres that I pull out, stretch, and then begin pulling into the shape of, well, essentially a basic bat. They're super simple, but that's okay. That's kind of the point here. I'm keeping most of the stuff here as simple as possible so that I can focus more time on the character's expression. Then I get that bat earring into place and then mirror it back across the x-axis. Then very quickly, it's off to creating the bolt for the neck. For this, I use the ZModeler brush, get a basic cylindrical shape in place, and then start adding some additional form, continuing on with the ZModeler brush, mainly using the bevel and crease functions of the ZModeler brush. A fun little tip that I like to use for hard surface modeling is beveling edges. I find that that creates just a little bit more visual interest around those hard edges and makes the plane changes not feel so sudden. And we're now at the part where we get to work on expression. This is mainly what I wanted to focus on this video with, so let's go ahead and talk about as much as we can. So we're going from a pretty happy expression to a pretty angry one. The first thing that I'm going to do here is start working on the mouth and adjusting the shape. So I definitely recommend getting some reference for anything like this for expression. Even though we're working on a stylized character, looking at some real people making these kinds of expressions can be extremely helpful. So again, the first thing I do is start kind of adjusting, getting that mouth into that kind of downturned, sharp pointed, kind of trapezoidal shape, and then I start refining from there. So you'll see me turn off my poly paint, essentially the color that's on the character, and swap back to my Follygon clay material. I'm doing this just so I can see a little bit better. If you are sculpting and working on something that has paint, texture, material on it, it's going to be hard to see what's going on with your surface. So my recommendation there is to just take a moment, turn it all off for a little bit, and continue to refine and make changes. Then turn your poly paint back on, or your texture, whatever you're working with, and continue to go from there. So as with all things in sculpting, you have to start by kind of blocking out, getting the general idea of it. So that's why I start with this really big mouth expression first, just kind of pushing it into the general direction, and then I continue to adjust from there. Then I start adjusting all the other parts that surround it, so things like the teeth, the tongue, and I even duplicate the top set of teeth to create a bottom set, as I didn't have one previously because it wasn't really seen. But with the expression here, with that mouth kind of open wide and that angry snarl, those bottom teeth are going to be seen a little bit more. By the way, fun little tooth trick here, or teeth trick I should say. I'm just using a simple cylinder for the teeth. It's nothing, too crazy, not individual teeth, but from the angle that I'm rendering the character from, since this is just going to be something quick, you're never gonna see the inside or top or bottom plane of that cylinder, so you'll just kind of see the representation of a basic form there, kind of representing the teeth, and it ends up looking pretty nice. As I get in here and work on the mouth a little bit more, I try to just refine that shape of the lower lip, especially those bottom corners. I want to get those super tight, and I want those to be the furthest point down. It felt really awkward before I made those adjustments, but now it's starting to head into a pretty good direction. And here is a quick comparison between where we started versus where we are now. The biggest change obviously being what we did to the mouth. Some of the assets in there, like the teeth and tongue, are moved around so the face isn't lining up quite as well, but you kind of get the idea there. And then there are some changes to the lower lid to make those eyes feel like they're squinting a bit more. All right, now time for one of my favorite parts, adding a little bit of asymmetry here at the end. Whenever you're talking about posing or expression, asymmetry is incredibly important. So the first thing I do is offset the bust, just kind of tilt her a little bit, adjust the angle of her head, and then I start working on the mouth. I offset things like the eyes and brows just a little bit, but for the most part, most of the asymmetry around this expression is happening around the mouth. So basically, I'm just offsetting that a little bit, kind of pulling up one side, making it a bit wider, kind of feeling like an open mouth snarl. I was just using Google Images online to find some examples of snarls that people were making with their mouth, so I used those examples to simplify the shape into what you see on screen now. The final stage of this process is something that I had to wait until I did everything else for, because it involves chopping up my geometry, or chopping up my face, and I am adding stitches. So the reason I am chopping up the face is so that I can get that cut line between the stitches that I'm going to be creating here in just a moment. So a quick tip for you guys is that you can take a slice curve brush and cut some geometry in half like I just did. Dynamesh those individual pieces, and then use your smooth brush on the edges very gently, depending on the resolution of your geometry, obviously. And that'll help to kind of soften that area. You could even inflate it if you wanted to, but it gives it that look of being separated or kind of cut in half. Then the very final step here is adding in the stitches. I add each stitch by hand just to make it feel a bit more organic, make each one a little bit differently sized, differently angled, try to make it feel as visually interesting as possible. I go back through with things like the move brush to just adjust them a little bit, sometimes using the transpose line to adjust rotation as well. Some of them felt a little bit too similar, so I had to go back through and make them feel a bit more unique. And then some of them were just too varied in size, so I didn't want this really big one next to this really small one. I felt like that didn't really make too much sense. so I went back through and changed those up as well. The stitch brush that I'm using is called the Orb Insert Stitch. Created by Orb himself, I believe it's a free brush. Even if it is, maybe consider throwing him a few bucks, he definitely deserves it. And that is pretty much gonna be it for day 13 of Sculptober. So I hope that getting to see the expression changes was helpful. If you guys have more questions, of course, let me know down in the comments. If you are new around here, click that subscribe button. And if you're interested in learning even more about digital sculpting, or learning from me personally, check out the Appeal Academy. It is my course and mentorship program that is designed to take you through the process of creating an appealing character, much like what we did here in this video. You can go through the whole course at your own pace, and at each successive step, there is personal feedback on your progress. That's gonna be it for this video, guys. Again, I hope it was helpful for you, and I'll see you in the next video with the prompt sunk.